So, in my 20s, my life was perfect. It was simple, I was happy, and I was so fulfilled. So, why did I then get into India's most unorganized, chaotic sector, hemp? If I had to be very honest with you today, I think there was a little part of me that was looking for a challenge, and there was a little part of me that wanted to shake things up. So, did I think that that challenge was going to become a crusade? Nope, not one bit. For the first 3 years of working with our hemp-based startup, it was wild right from the get-go. So I tell people, people would say, hey, listen, what do you do? And I'd say, we run this company. And they'd be like, so you sell weed? And I'd be like, no, that's not what we do. And 5 years in as well, I still find myself saying, hemp makes you healthy. It doesn't get you high. And we say it so often that we've actually put it on the box now. I want to go back to this time during COVID where we had a lot of people who were bored out of their minds who would call and say, hey, tell us about this startup. What are you doing with hemp? Where's it from? And stuff. And I'd give them my entire marketing spiel saying that, oh, it's from here. It's so nutritious. It's really healthy. And then they'd be like, so what kind of weed is it? And why do I have to buy it online? So that was it. That was our first couple of years. So cut back early to this year. 2024, and we won this really big award by the government. And I borrowed my mother's raw silk blue sari, and I said, okay, this is a big day for us. So I went there, and I'm standing there with my award, and I'm eating my dinner because it was one of these hotels that, where they have these award ceremonies. And this gentleman comes up and says, excuse me, ma'am. And I said, yes. And he said, madam, I was on your panel. I said, yes, sir, thank you. He's like, madam, your product, that hemp, it has a little bit of... what is it called? And I'm just looking at him, completely decked up with an award. And he's like, little bit of cocaine. And I was like, no, it doesn't have cocaine, sir. And then he's like, no, madam, it has a little bit of cocaine. So that is what it's like working in the hemp industry in India. So I'm here to share this hack, this secret that I discovered a couple of years ago. And I wanted to share it with you because of this wonderful platform today. So during 2020, in the whole chaos of the lockdown, I was a mess. I was a real mess. And I needed some sort of a lifeline. I needed something to hang on to. So one day I woke up and I said, you know what? I'm going to say yes to every single opportunity that comes my way. And saying yes put me outside my comfort zone so many times. I can't tell you, and especially the lockdown, right? Everything was unpredictable. For example, at that time, we were incubated with IIMB's very elite incubation center called NSR Cell. 11,500 women had applied, and only 200 of us had made it to the top 200 finals. And then Ankita, I remember, who was our head of the department, she called me one day and she said, Jayanti, I'd actually like for you to make a presentation on how to make a pitch deck. And I said, Ankita, you want me to present something to my peers? I was mortified because these people were way ahead of me professionally. They'd done so much more. And in my head, I said, no, I can't do this. I even typed out an email saying, nope, I'm not going to do this. I was just going to decline the whole thing. But then there was a small voice that said, say yes, say yes, say yes. So I did. I said, okay, fine, I'm going to do this. And I did say yes. And that was such a game changer because that opened so many doors. I realized I was an effective communicator. I could take complex things and break it down. It's also one of the reasons that I'm here in front of you today. The biggest yes that door opened was the country's largest and most dramatic funding show that took place in Bombay. And season 1 of this funding show, which I'm sure you all know what it is, was, again, during COVID 1 and COVID 2. So I went there. I went to Bombay with my 3-minute, perfectly timed, perfect IMB approved script. And I said, here, here's my script. And then they looked at me and they said, hey, this is Sony and it's a Hindi audience. You do speak Hindi, right? And a little bit of me died inside. And I was like, yes, I can learn it. Okay, so cut back to, I don't know, how many of you here grew up in Bangalore in the 80s and 90s? Yeah, so Nobody spoke Hindi. Nobody spoke Hindi, right? So, and we learned it, but we never really practiced it. And if you spoke to an auto driver in Hindi, it was the surest way of losing your auto ride as well. So coming back to that startup show, the production team wrote down a 3-minute script for me in Hindi. I was completely out of my comfort zone, right? So I sat backstage, didn't talk to anybody, just sat and I learned. I just studied that script for 3 days. It was so unnatural, but I did it. I did it. I stood there on that stage and I delivered this speech in whatever I could. And, that one moment, that power of saying yes, put hemp on a national platform. And to think that we couldn't advertise about it, we couldn't talk, Google was flagging our ads, none of that was possible. So this was a huge boost to the hemp industry as well. And to give you an idea how this works, like 70,000 people had applied to this show, and only 70 had actually been aired. So that is also the power of saying yes. Saying yes also brings upon some very unplanned changes. When you have your OKR, sometimes it just throws you off a little bit, and sometimes it's nice to also go with the flow because it becomes a habit. Once you say yes, once you're doing something a little uncomfortable, you're okay saying yes the next time. Another huge milestone that happened in this similar period was when somebody said, hey, can you stop drinking for a year? And I'm not an alcoholic, but I was like, and they said it in jest, and I said, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to do it. Yes, I'm going to do it. So I hadn't fully thought this through, but I had already committed to it. And that was difficult. The first 3 months of not drinking, going out socially was really, really difficult. I became some sort of a recluse because alcohol is our social glue. But what not drinking does is it gives you a lot of time to think, a lot of time you spend with yourself, and you also lose a very outer, that protective layer that you have, and you really get to know who you are. So not drinking also meant that my friendships changed, so it was a difficult transition. But this change allowed me to grow. I could measure the growth that happened that 1 year. And so much so that last August, I signed up for the Kashmir Great Lakes Trek, which is a very challenging trek. And I did it with 16 people. No, I didn't know any of them, but I signed up because I was comfortable with myself, knowing that I'd done that work and knowing that I'd be okay. And I had the time of my life. So saying yes also led me to football. I was invited to a football session one Sunday, and I said, okay, yes, I'm going for this. And I loved it so much that I started playing football at the age of 37, and I've been playing it twice a week ever since. So these small, uncomfortable changes, they all actually stand up, and they stack up in a way that you change. You become you become somebody else and somebody better. And that change is always something that leads to growth. So as you grow older, and a lot of you here are young, you move cities, you start jobs, some of you start families, there are lots of changes happening. But then sometimes there's still a part of the puzzle that's missing. You don't know what it is, but you're still wondering what it is. So saying yes sometimes gives you that answer. And it helps you find it. For me, that yes was service. I realized that what I wanted to do was give back in some form. So when you give back, it doesn't mean you have to take on this huge movement and educate an entire village or, do anything like that. It can mean just changing one person's life for the better through education or through mentorship. So when you do that, when you change that one person's life, you actually change an entire generation. So here's the thing with change. It's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable. Your body doesn't like it. The first thing that you go through is this fight or flight mode, and it's deep, deep anxiety. So you shouldn't really worry about this because this is our body which is hardwired to trying to keep you safe. It doesn't want you to take the road not taken. It wants you to do things that will keep you very safe because back in our caveman days, that's what our body does. It just wants to keep you alive. So here's the trick. So in your head, you change the narrative. If you're scared about doing something, instead of saying, oh my God, I don't know, instead of working yourself up, change the narrative in your head. And then you realize your body automatically relaxes. Once you tell yourself, I can, I will, I shall, it automatically relaxes. So here's my challenge to you. As you leave this wonderful auditorium today, think of one thing that scares you, just one thing, and say yes to it. you'll realize that that yes leads to growth and new experiences. And the next time you find yourself hesitating, whatever decision, as small as it may be, just think of this tiny word, YES, and say it. It can change your life. Thank you.